Discover the incredible moment a millionaire transformed a poor girl's life after a surprising hour. Emma stood amidst the chaos of the food bank, her heart pounding like a rapid drumbeat. Rows of struggling families lined up, each looking weary but determined, and she felt the weight of their struggles on her shoulders. She knocked cans off the shelves nervously, picturing the bills piling up at home. Rent, groceries, her mother's medications, they screamed for her attention, filling her with despair. How could she balance school, her part-time jobs, and still be a beacon of hope for her mother? Her fingers trembled as she filled bags with canned food, hoping her effort could ease someone else's burden, if only for a moment. But whispers followed her, cold and cutting, bouncing off the walls like a cruel echo. Look at her, working at the food bank again. Does she think she'll be a doctor? Who would help a poor girl like her? With each glance, anger clenched her stomach, one part hurt, one part shame, and a deep-seated fear. Would she ever be free of this life? This desperation? Yet she kept pushing, kept smiling, determined to rise above the limitations imposed by her zip code. Just then, Richard entered, a man who seemed to belong to another world. He stood there, eyes scanning the room, transcending the chilled air that filled Emma with anxiety. She felt an inexplicable pull, drawn to the softness in his gaze that hinted at tenacity within his expensive suit. He was wealthy, yet as Emma approached to offer assistance, he looked rugged, weary of the fast-paced world he came from. She couldn't ignore the spark in his eyes as he locked on hers, the subtle strength barely hidden beneath the surface. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Days passed and Emma found herself seeking Richard out. She couldn't shake that initial connection. Was it hope or misguided ambition? He became her mentor in small, unobtrusive ways, often inviting her to speak with him, share her dreams. She confided in him about wanting to be a doctor, how she wanted to provide for her mother not just now, but in the future, lifting them from this cycle of struggle. But with each uplift, Richard grew introspective, almost haunted. She sensed a part of him tugged back to a past he was trying to escape. But then came the day when her sanctuary shattered. Rumors swirled, news broke that the local hospital might close, and Emma's mind spun. Her dream, her cause, her very pursuit of dignity, could it all vanish because of an injustice as simple as funding? Richard revealed his own family's wealth, but Emma feared there was a darker shadow trailing behind him, a truth that could tear everything apart. She clenched her jaw, fighting rising anxiety. Where was the loyalty to his roots? The very roots that intertwined with her own? Every moment intensified the tension, her feelings toward him a muddled mix of admiration and resentment. Could she trust him? Emma stood at a precipice, preparing to confront not only the needs of her community, but also the disquiet of her heart. What secrets lay between them, and would they shatter the bond they had begun to knit together? As she wrestled with her conscience, Emma knew change was imminent. The stakes felt higher than ever, and just as she found her voice, a harrowing secret about her own family's past hovered dangerously close, threatening to collide with everything she had started to build. Emma woke early the next morning, remnants of anxiety weaving through her troubled dreams. As she prepared for another day filled with uncertainty, she couldn't help but replay her last conversation with Richard in her mind. His silence had been a palpable void, filled with unspoken secrets. She glanced at her reflection in the mirror, searching for the girl determined to become a doctor, the one who could shake off the shame and fight for her place. Yet beneath the determination, doubts seeped in. Was this path truly hers or merely a borrowed dream? As she made her way to the food bank, the city hummed around her, a rhythm of ambition and despair layered in every honk and shout. Emma clutched her notebook tightly, filled with ideas for her medical school application, visions of her future flickering like fireflies, a distant, yet undeniable promise. But today, the promise felt threatened. The looming hospital closure gnawed at her thoughts, making her stomach twist with apprehension. Could she forge a way forward when it seemed the very foundation of her dreams was crumbling? At the food bank, she stepped inside to find the usual buzz of voices muted. A tense atmosphere wrapped around her as volunteers murmured about potential impacts of the hospital closing. Emma took a deep breath. Each can she collected for distribution felt heavier than the last. With each weighty movement, fear gnawed at her ambition, solidifying her resolve. She needed to confront Richard not just as a mentor but as a person entangled in her future. During her break, she waited for him, her thoughts tumbling over one another. When Richard finally appeared, a look of tortured determination shaped his features. As he approached, she noticed the light in his eyes, fiercely devoted but dimmed by something deeper, something unshared. "Emma," he greeted, his voice carrying an unexpected weight. "How are you holding up?" "Not well. I need to talk," she replied, her heart racing. "This hospital closure, it's not just a rumor. It changes everything, doesn't it?" His gaze flickered, tension across his brow. "It does. But there may be ways to challenge this." "Challenge?" Emma stepped closer, voice steady. "You said your family has resources? Can't they help? Don't you care about this community?" Richard hesitated. She saw a maelstrom of emotions whirl in his expression: remorse, stubbornness, and a flicker of something akin to fear. "You don't understand my family's wealth. It comes with strings attached. Business isn't personal, and sometimes loyalty feels like betrayal." "Loyalty?" she echoed, swallowing the sudden bitterness her words brought to her throat. "What about the loyalty to the people who need us? To the future? You have a chance to make a difference." Richard held her gaze, and the air thickened with unspoken truths. "Maybe my loyalty is misplaced. I think this world is more complicated than we want to believe." As silence engulfed them, Emma felt sparks of anger and desperation ignite within her. "I refuse to have my dreams dictated by your family's complicated loyalties. I want to fight for this place, and I want you on my side." His expression softened, fascination sparking in his eyes. "You're fierce. Someone has to be." The fire in her words surprised even herself, a revelation. She was ready to fight not just for her dreams but for change. Richard stepped back, as if distancing himself from her fervor. "Then what do you propose?" Emma's heart raced as inspiration ignited ideation. She could be more than just a girl from the food bank, she could be the architect of her destiny. "We plan real strategies to preserve the hospital, advocate for the community needs. This is our fight, and it's time to make some noise. Together?" "Together," she affirmed, clarity washing over her. The bond they formed could either be her strength or her downfall. But just before they could cement their plans, a loud crash echoed from the front of the food bank. A few cans had toppled, an accidental metaphor for her precarious position. As she turned toward the noise, a stranger burst through the door, a wild look in his eyes. "Help! We need help!" Emma instinctively stepped forward, adrenaline surging through her. Whatever this was, it felt urgent, like a turning point in her tumultuous journey. Emma's heart thudded against her chest. This was going to change everything. Emma's instincts kicked in the moment she saw the stranger's frantic eyes, compelling her to move before she could fully process the situation. The cries for help hung in the air like a dense fog, shrouding her thoughts in urgency. "Please, someone is hurt just outside," the stranger shouted, glancing back over his shoulder as if expecting someone to follow him. Emma barely hesitated, that sense of purpose pulsing about her, reawakening her determination amidst the chaos of doubt. Richard's brow furrowed as he processed the scene unfolding before them. "We can't just leave," he said, a tinge of uncertainty creeping into his voice. "Why not?" Emma challenged, her heart thundering against her ribcage. "People need us." With a deep breath, Richard seemed to gather himself. They both rushed outside, following the stranger who led them to a small crowd gathered around an elderly woman lying on the sidewalk. Her face was pale, and a faint groan unsettled Emma's stomach. The reality of the hospital closure felt more tangible now. There might not be a place to take her, not when medical assistance was already stretched thin. "No ambulance is coming," the stranger explained, his voice trembling with disbelief. "They said they're too busy with emergencies." The words struck Emma, reverberating in her chest. Here was a real-life embodiment of everything she feared the consequences of an overwhelmed healthcare system. It solidified her resolve with a startling clarity. In this moment, she wasn't just a bystander, she could help. "Emma, we need to make sure she's safe until help arrives," Richard urged, and she could see the intense worry battling with his own sense of responsibility. "I can check her vitals," Emma blurted out, surprising herself with the authority in her voice. She had volunteered at local clinics and had a part-time job shadowing doctors. The skills were ingrained in her, lying beneath layers of self-doubt. Richard stepped aside, allowing her to kneel beside the woman. "Where's it hurting?" Emma asked gently, her eyes scanning the woman's face for signs of consciousness. "Can you hear me?" Emma's hands moved methodically, checking pulse and breathing rate, her mind racing through the procedures she had learned, yet infrequently practiced. Every minute detail consumed her thoughts, drowning out the fear of failure. "Her breathing is shallow," she noted. "We have to elevate her legs. It could help with circulation." With Richard and the stranger's assistance, they managed to get the woman propped up on a nearby bench. Emma's certainty surged, and she forced herself to focus, pushing aside the doubts that wanted to creep back in. "She's going to be okay. Help is on the way. Just keep her calm." As she directed them on how to keep the elderly woman comfortable, Emma's heart filled with a sense of purpose she hadn't felt before. It was exhilarating, intoxicating. The very act of helping grounded her, providing clarity amid the chaos around her. At that moment, Richard observed her with an intensity that felt almost admiring. "You really know what you're doing," he acknowledged, and something in his tone told her that wasn't just about the situation at hand. "Maybe I do," Emma replied, allowing a shred of confidence to break through. "This is why I'm doing this. It's about more than just my dreams. If nothing changes, people like her want to have anyone to fight for them." Suddenly, the sirens echoed in the distance, a sound that wrapped around them like a lifeline, pulling Emma back from the precipice of uncertainty. But as relief flooded the crowd, Emma's mind spun with the implications of what they had just witnessed. The urgency of the situation had ignited more than just the immediate need for help. It had revealed the precarious edge on which their community balanced. The hospital closure was more than a statistic. It was a reality impacting lives. Decisions had to be made. "Emma, we need to act," Richard said, his voice taut with urgency as he met her gaze. "This isn't just about us anymore." Unexpectedly invigorated by the adrenaline and resolve that surged through her, Emma dared to envision a future larger than her individual ambitions. Perhaps there was a way forward, a way to rally others, inspire change, and influence the very systems threatening her dreams. But before she could articulate those ideas, a voice from the crowd called to them. "You have to see this." Nervous energy hummed through her. Just what lay beyond was a mystery she sensed could alter the path on which she stood. They turned as one, anticipation crackling in the air like static, that hint of trouble lurking just around the corner. Emma's heart raced anew, fully aware that the next moment would demand everything she had gathered thus far. Emma moved through the crowd, a mix of adrenaline and curiosity propelling her forward. The words echoed in her mind, "You have to see this." She felt an urgency to not just observe, but to understand, to anticipate what challenges lay ahead. Richard followed closely, his eyes scanning the faces around them, every second feeling stretched, laden with unspoken fear and hope. The crowd parted slightly, and at the center was a digital tablet held high by a young man, pointing at the screen, his brow knotted with intensity. Emma stepped closer, her throat dry, each heartbeat amplifying her tension. "Check this out. It's a message from the city about the hospital," he announced, voice echoing against the backdrop of murmured conversations. The screen illuminated his face, one moment of chaos captured in pixels. Her heart sank as she read the scrawled text, detailing a new initiative, a temporary closure of the facility due to financial strains, with the vague promise of future discussions on community wellness. "This is a joke, right?" Someone blurted out, frustration evident in his tone. The murmurs of discontent began to swell, feeding off the collective shock. Emma's mind raced. Perhaps she was nowhere near as alone in her frustration and fear as she had thought. She felt a nudge of compassion, recognizing the palpable hurt hidden in the glances. Each individual was wrestling with their personal stakes, and in this moment, Emma realized the truth. Her anxiety had shifted into an opportunity, a chance to channel her energy appropriately for change. "Listen," she said, her voice louder than she expected. "This is our community we're talking about. If the hospital is closing, we need to demand answers. We can't let this happen without a fight." Richard looked at her, a new light igniting in his eyes, as if he'd just noticed the fire she carried. "You mean we should organize something?" "Yes. We need to bring people together, a meeting, anything." The thought sprang from her mind almost unbidden, mingling with excitement. This was no longer just a local issue. It was the catalyst of a profound awakening for her. The young man lowered the tablet, eyes widening. "You're serious? People will come together for this? It's not just talk, it's a necessity." Emma's voice softened as she felt a wave of responsibility settle over her. She wasn't merely arguing, she was compelling others to share in the vision for reform, a place where life wasn't dictated by financial thresholds. Suddenly, her determination morphed into doubt. What if no one showed up? What if her plans fell flat, just like those dreams that had once invaded her thoughts? Yet, deep within, she felt a voice rising, encouraging her to act beyond her fears. She wasn't alone anymore, those around her shared her urgency. Richard stepped forward, a quiet assurance in his stance. "Let us draft a petition. If we can gather signatures, we can present it directly to the city council. They have to listen if we come together." His suggestion lit a spark. Emma beamed. "Yes. And we can use social media to amplify our voices. I have connections, doctors, nurses, we can reach out and get their support too." Every moment of their discussion ignited her ambition, a powerful boost against her lingering insecurities. This wasn't a flight of fancy, this was real, actionable change. The crowd began to murmur in agreement. Excitement buzzed at the prospect of reclaiming their community. And yet, as anticipation filled the air, doubts rested at the back of Emma's mind. She could see Richard's trust in her, but could she truly be the leader they needed? Maybe they would rally together, but what if she faltered when it mattered most? Was she prepared to face not just the bureaucracy, but the inevitable adversaries who would resist their fight? But the thought flickered away, replaced by resolve as Emma stepped into her newfound role. She had to believe she had the capacity to grasp this moment and shape it into something impactful, no matter the challenge. As the group began to form around her, Emma opened her mouth to speak. Once more, hoping to articulate a vision for the fight ahead. "Tonight, we begin," but before she could give voice to the next words, a cold wind swept through the gathering, and a familiar shadow loomed at the edge of her line of sight. A figure she recognized from the very system they were challenging. The atmosphere changed, she could feel it in her bones. The confrontation was approaching, and the stakes were about to get much higher. Emma tightened her grip on the microphone, a wave of uncertainty crashing over her as she faced the gathering crowd. The figure she recognized, Alan, the city manager, stood poised just beyond the fringes, arms crossed and an expression of vague amusement painted across his face. The laughter of onlookers mingled with her heartbeat, hammering away at her concentration. He had been instrumental in the decisions that put their community in jeopardy. "Emma," Richard urged, placing a supportive hand on her shoulder, "you're ready for this." His belief in her ignited a flicker of confidence, even as the pressure mounted. Taking a deep breath, Emma pushed back against her fears. "We need clarity. We need to ask the city for justification about this sudden closure." She glanced toward Alan, fully aware that he was part of the very system she was challenging. "And we need action to ensure our hospital remains operational." Voices murmured behind her, echoing her words, yet the clear runway of her intent felt cluttered and brimming with doubt. What if they don't respond? She thought. The potential for failure hovered ominously above her, but it was countered by a burgeoning sense of purpose. If she could rally courage in her words, maybe they could summon enough collective pressure to force change. Alan's posture shifted slightly, his interest piqued as he stepped forward. You think your little gathering here is going to change anything? His voice was low, almost mocking, and it cut through the intended solidarity like a knife. Emma's stomach nodded. This was her moment of truth. She could react defensively or seize an opportunity to confront the very architecture of power. What is the plan if people need medical help and the doors are closed, Alan? How are you going to explain that? What are you, a doctor now? He sneered, attempting to deflate her. There was nothing curated about his tone. It was blunt, belittling, and yet it sparked a flare of indignation in Emma. No, she said, the words coming unbiddenly. But I am a member of this community, and I won't let fear silence me. Richard stepped up beside her, ready to leap into the fray should she stumble. Look, we all know this is about finances, about pricing us out of healthcare. You're risking lives for profit, and we deserve answers. You can't hide behind bureaucracy anymore. Emma took a commanding stance, allowing her frustration to spill into conviction. The murmurs grew louder, and she caught sight of several heads nodding in agreement. This was her awakening. She was transforming from an anxious observer into a determined advocate. She could feel her anxieties melting away as conviction built within her. Emma thought of the stories she had heard, patients depending on that hospital, families shattered by sudden closures. I'm not here just to complain, she went on. I'm here to demand a plan, a solution. Where is our path forward? Alan's demeanor shifted, no longer masked in nonchalance. You can make all the noise you want, but changes aren't made overnight. You'll need more than just words to sway the council. More determination surged inside her. Then let us challenge them. I'll gather evidence, rally support, I'll ensure they cannot ignore us. And with that declaration, her focus sharpened anew. She had unlocked a potent insight. Words had power, but action was where transformation began. It was a daunting leap, but the dawning realization of her potential invigorated her spirit. As Emma turned to face the crowd again, the momentum felt surreal. It was electric with possibility. But even as she rallied their spirits, a subtle fear threatened to coil around her resolve. What if all her efforts fell flat? What if Alan was the last opposition she faced? Before any doubt could solidify, the air grew thick with tension as Alan prepared to respond. The question simmered. Would her newfound voice be enough to withstand the looming challenge? As the crowd held its breath, Emma faced the trepidation bubbling inside her. Whatever happened next, she would have to stride forward into this uncharted territory. There was no turning back. This was the pivotal moment that could reshape everything she believed about herself. Her next move could make or break everything. Would she be ready to outmaneuver the roadblocks ahead? Emma's mind raced, every heartbeat matching the mounting anticipation of the crowd. Alan's gaze bore into her, a predator watching its prey. She could almost feel the weight of his skepticism suffocating her resolve. Yet, amidst the pressure, a burgeoning clarity emerged. This wasn't merely about saving a hospital or questioning a decision, it was about redefining her narrative, about stepping into a role that she had shunned for so long. Listen, she said, addressing Alan directly. You may think these community gatherings amount to nothing. But I promise you, people are tired of being pushed around. We will stand together, and you'll have no choice but to engage with us. The soft, muffled applause from the crowd ignited something deep within her, a mix of anger and the thrill of newfound possibility. She was beginning to understand that each word she spoke was not just resistance, it was a step towards her own self-assertion. Surging momentum lifted her. She could no longer view herself as just a reactive force. Alan looked momentarily taken aback, but he quickly regained his composure. You think this is a game? You'll need to do more than just talk to make a difference, he continued, attempting to dismantle her determination with icy indifference. This isn't a game, Alan, Emma replied, her tone steady, almost rehearsed. It's real life for the families relying on healthcare. It's about their lives, and my tenacity won't diminish simply because you dismiss us. The tension thickened in the air, an unspoken challenge hanging between them. Emma sensed that every eye was on her, the collective weight of their hopes resting heavily on her shoulders. Was she really ready for this? The reality of stepping into the forefront of their fight was both exhilarating and terrifying. In the back of her mind, the little doubts tried to resurface, insidious whispers that suggested she might fail. What if her plan collapsed? What if she became just another voice drowned out by people like Alan? But this moment wasn't just about voicing fears. It was about embracing her capacity for leadership, of finding strength in vulnerability. "I challenge you to a public forum," Emma stated, the words escaping her lips before fear could seize them. "An open discussion with the council, where we can bring all concerns to light. I'll gather the stories, the evidence, the real impact on lives that this hospital serves." Alan's expression darkened, his dismissal fractured. "And what if they ignore you? What then?" "Then I want to stop." The realization struck her like a bolt of electricity. She was envisioning a plan, not just for herself but for the community she was beginning to feel a part of. "I'll reach out to the press. I'll advocate for public transparency. I'll become a thorn in your side until you realize the gravity of this decision." Richard's hand clenched her shoulder tighter, lending her strength. She could feel his unwavering support filtering through her nerves, bolstering her resolve. Behind them, the crowd murmured, a restless ripple of agreement again. Determination coursed through her veins. Emma felt a growing sense of purpose guiding her forward. Each heartbeat was now a reminder of her agency, of her role in this narrative. As people began to cheer softly, she understood that her fears were beginning to dissolve into a palpable energy that urged her onward. Alan stiffened at her challenge, indignation flashing in his eyes, a striking contrast to the muted laughter from earlier. "You think you can intimidate the council?" he retorted, his voice edged with disbelief. "I'm not here to intimidate anyone," she replied, no longer seeking his validation. "I'm here to remind you that your decisions have real repercussions. They affect lives. And I'm proud to stand and fight for those lives." The dynamic had shifted. With every word, her conviction seemed to cloak her in newfound armor, one that would enable her to engage with the larger system in a way she had always shied away from before. But as the crowd's energy surged, so did a flicker of uncertainty in her gut. Was she prepared for what lay ahead? What would happen when she faced the council, and how would they respond? The air was thick with tension, anticipation merging with Emma's doubts as Alan's expression hardened. She stood poised for the next round of this confrontation, sensing the real challenge was just on the horizon. But now, with her plan crystallizing, did she have what it would take to transform this moment into a movement? As tension hung palpably in the air, the real battle to reclaim their collective power was only just beginning. Emma awoke the next morning with a mix of resolve and apprehension. The echoes of the previous night's confrontation resonated within her like a battle drum, urging her towards action, yet the weight of uncertainty lurked in the background. She needed to prepare, to solidify her plan if she were to stand before the council and demand change. With Richard's encouragement still fresh in her mind, she set to work crafting a comprehensive outline of the stories and evidence she'd present. The first step was to gather testimonials from those impacted by the hospital's decisions. Each narrative was a thread in the larger tapestry of her argument, each voice an ally in her crusade. The local library became her refuge, a sanctuary of knowledge where she could dive deep into past decisions made about healthcare in her town, tracing the lineage of struggles that echoed her own. Hours slipped by as she combed through articles and reports, scanning for data that would fortify her stance. It was a slow burn of revelation. She began to see her world not just as one of personal grievances but as a confluence of systemic issues that demanded visibility. As Emma worked, she embraced her growing confidence. It dawned on her that this preparation was not just about building a case, it was about honing her voice. Each idea she penned felt like a vital note she could strike in the symphony of advocacy she was orchestrating. It wasn't a mere noise she aimed to produce in the council. It was music that stirred hearts and minds. Conversations during her research fueled her determination. Strangers turned friends shared their stories, unfolding tales of lost loved ones due to inadequate care, and hopes dashed against the wall of bureaucratic indifference. Emma listened intently, capturing their truths in a notebook, not just as statistics, but as human experiences woven with raw emotion. This was a significant turn. She was no longer the person who recoiled at public speaking or shied away from conflict. No, she was transforming. Emma was learning to harness the power of vulnerability as strength. The stories began to meld into her own, empowering her. She could sense a swelling tide within her, a sensation she recognized as purpose. Yet amongst this surge, she also felt the weight of her responsibility. Standing before the council would mean not only putting her own fears on display but those of every individual whose lives were intertwined with the hospital's future. Missteps could echo far beyond herself, impacting families already on the precipice of despair. As the day of the public forum approached, doubts crept in once more, questions now less about her ability to present and more about her legitimacy to challenge the authority ingrained in the system. Could she truly effect change, or was she merely a naive dreamer, squaring off against the machine? But what if? What if this was her moment to redefine not only her narrative but that of many? What if she could indeed sway the council? She allowed the what-ifs to transform from whispers of doubt to kindling for her fire. The night before the forum, as Emma ran through her presentation in the mirror, her voice steady and clear, she realized how far she had come. She was no longer negotiating fear with hesitation. She was preparing to engage fiercely and genuinely, repurposing her anxiety into action. And yet, even with the success of her preparations, the uncertainty loomed larger than before. The clock was ticking, and soon she would find herself in that room, confronting Alan, facing the council's judgment. The challenge was at her doorstep, the moment of truth looming. Emma's heart raced with the intensity of what lay ahead. She had fought fiercely for the lives of others, but could she now fight for her own right to be heard? Would this moment forge her into the leader she was meant to become, or would it leave her back at square one? As the sun dipped below the horizon, she took a final breath, the weight of the day pressing in on her. Tomorrow would be the test, and everything depended on how she chose to embrace it. Would she stand tall, or would she falter in the face of sacrifice? The time had indeed come to face the council. Emma awoke with a sense of urgency that eclipsed her previous unease. The daylight, streaming through her window, seemed to beckon her towards her impending challenge. Today would not merely be about her voice but also about the voices she had gathered, the dreams and fears intertwined with her own. As she dressed, she carefully selected attire that balanced professionalism with an air of approachability. The fabric felt like armor against the judgment to come. With her notes secure under her arm, Emma made her way to the council chambers, each step punctuated by the hum of her racing thoughts. The world outside was alive, unaware of the internal battle unfolding within her. Would she find the courage to confront the men and women who represented the very system she was challenging? Just as she nestled herself into a small row of chairs among the community members, a profound realization crystallized. She was not stepping into this arena alone. The chamber doors opened, revealing a semicircular desk lined with council members who looked every bit the authority figures Emma feared. Alan sat prominently among them, his demeanor cool and detached. The once intimidating atmosphere of the room now seemed like a lit stage awaiting a performance. In a matter of moments, it would be her turn to speak, to reveal the inner complexities of the stories that had echoed within her for weeks. As speakers rose and fell throughout the morning, Emma absorbed their experiences, each robust narrative reinforcing her own convictions. It became clearer that her fight extended beyond personal grievances. These shared struggles forged a collective struggle, a demand for justice. She made mental notes, not just for her presentation, but to weave into her speech the universality of their pain. When her name was called, Emma stood, taking a brief moment to steady her breath before she approached the podium. The microphone felt foreign in her hand, yet she found herself grasping it with determination. The sea of faces before her blurred momentarily, but as she looked closer, she caught glimmers of empathy. She began to speak, her voice intent but steady, revealing snippets from her research, intertwining them with the heart-wrenching stories laid bare by those who had trusted her. As she spoke, a captivating realization struck Emma. Her vulnerability held a power she had never truly understood until now. She was commanding the room, her passion igniting the reality of the council's indifference. Her voice rose above the whispers of doubt, transforming into something almost tangible. In sharing her own brewing discontent and the shared suffering of her community, Emma ignited a spark that resonated, challenging the very authority she had feared. However, no sooner had she painted the vivid landscape of despair than Alan interjected, confident and dismissive. The weight of his words landed as if they were heavy stones thrown into her sea of enthusiasm. He questioned her authority to speak on systemic issues, almost dismissing her as just another face in the crowd. The doubt she had fought against in her preparatory nights bubbled to the surface, threatening to upend her momentum. For a fleeting moment, Emma felt cast adrift. But instead of retreating, she clung to the stories, to the faces of those who had shared their every truth with her. Each story was a lifeline, and she realized then that the power to challenge the system did not derive from titles or accolades, but from lived experiences and unwavering tenacity. With new fervor, she countered his assertion, articulating the necessity of empathy over bureaucracy. The room stirred, eyes shifted. She was no longer just Emma, the concerned citizen. She was their voice, unrelenting in the pursuit of justice. As she concluded, the applause from the audience mingled with her racing heart. It was a curious blend of fear and exhilaration. Elated yet uncertain, she stepped away from the podium, knowing she had laid her truth bare. Yet, as she walked back to her seat amidst the accolades, uncertainty began to claw at the edges of her victory. Alan's smirk lingered in her memory. What retaliatory maneuver lay in wait for her, and the momentum she'd just generated? In the depths of that moment, Emma realized fighting for change often meant inviting conflict into her life. And as she sat and gathered her thoughts, she couldn't shake the sense that today was just the beginning. The council might try to silence her, but she was prepared to confront not just Alan, but whatever forces may rise against her. This battle had awakened something profound within her, a resilience she had less known and more discovered. Would it be enough? Only time would tell as she braced for whatever came next. Emma settled into her seat, the applause still ringing in her ears like the remnants of a distant storm. Each clap echoed against the walls of her insecurities, yet somewhere deep inside, a newfound strength unfurled. But Alan's skepticism loomed over her, a dark figure in her brightening landscape. What would be his next move? She met the gaze of a few familiar faces in the crowd, sensing their silent solidarity, a reminder that she was not alone. The council moved on to its next agenda item, the banality of bureaucratic discussions returning to the chamber like a tide washing over her moment of triumph. Emma's pulse quickened. She could feel the heat of adrenaline ebbing into a cold flash of doubt. She had spoken her truth, and for the first time it resonated. But would it matter during follow-up discussions where the council members would undoubtedly invalidate her passion with apathy? The assembly concluded, and as people filed out of their seats, Emma remained still, her mind racing. She pulled out her notes, rereading her key points, trying to mine lines of defense against Alan's condescension. Was her experience enough to substantiate her voice? Could she truly challenge authority? The thought echoed ominously as she realized that this journey was about more than rhetoric. A soft voice broke through her thoughts. "You did great up there." It was Sandra, a fellow activist whose words often resonated with Emma. "I could feel the weight of your testimony. People can't ignore that." Emma smiled, but the corners of her mouth wouldn't rise. "Thanks, but there's still so much uncertainty. Alan won't let this go." Sandra leaned in, determination flickering in her eyes. "You know what you have to do, right? You need to prepare for his response. Get ahead of him." The gravity of that suggestion settled on Emma. Preparation. Rehearsing responses. She had thought she was ready, but now understood that engaging with opposition required more than passion, it demanded strategy. If Alan sought to discredit her further, she'd need to weaponize her knowledge, turning every potential attack into an opportunity for action. That evening, Emma sprawled on her bed, books and papers strewn around her like the aftermath of a tempest. She researched Alan, tracking his voting history, speeches, and positions on issues relevant to her cause. The more she dove into the data, the more a plan took shape in her mind. She would orchestrate a direct confrontation, not just with Alan, but with the very system that rode on the coattails of indifference. Days passed, each moment an intense whirlwind of planning and rehearsing. Emma rearranged her stride. The tremors of anxiety gave way to the steel edge of determination. She asked for counsel from those within her network, leveraging collective wisdom. Every conversation became a lesson, and with every lesson, her confidence burgeoned. On the day of the follow-up council meeting, she came prepared, armed with statistics, compelling narratives, and a laser focus that was almost palpable. Alan's smirk flickered in her peripheral awareness, a glitch in the system she aimed to confront. As the meeting commenced, Emma's heartbeat thrummed with rhythm and expectation, but a rush of calm enveloped her as well. She was there on a mission not just to defend her position, but to elevate the discourse itself. She needed not just to convince them but to inspire them through the voices of those they had neglected. Once again, she began, holding Alan's gaze with a steady conviction, we must revisit the stories that demand our attention not as mere statistics, but as the fabric of our community. Each word projected clarity into the council chamber like beams of light, dissecting the shadows of ignorance that lingered. But just as momentum was building, she felt a sharp pang of trepidation. What if he turned the tables, as he had before? The moment hung palpably, waiting between her resolve and an impending counterattack. Could she truly withstand the wave, amplify her cause, and unravel the insidious refrains of hesitance that sought to entangle her voice? Emma felt the question resonate, morphing into a challenge echoing in her mind. Would she let the darkness reclaim the narrative? Her gaze shifted back to Alan, and for a fleeting instant, she saw a flicker of uncertainty in his confident facade. The tension mounted, and within Emma, the conviction intensified. The fight, a visceral embodiment of all she stood for, was preparing its final act. The stage was set for their inevitable clash, and as the silence stretched, Emma knew the answer was within the words she would choose next. The time had come to face what lay ahead. Emma's heart raced as the council chamber filled with anticipation, an electric silence settling as emotional tension soared. Here she stood, a girl who had once doubted her capabilities, now poised to challenge the very foundations of a bureaucratic power structure that had long disregarded the needs of her community. This was not merely a moment of personal confrontation, it was a collective stand, a fight to reclaim dignity for those who had faith in her voice. Today, I'm not merely speaking for myself but for every individual who has been affected by the potential closure of our hospital, Emma began, her voice steady, resonating with confidence. The faces in the audience leaned forward, and she forged a connection with each of them, recalling their struggles, their stories that now intertwined with her own. Closure means more than just losing a building, it symbolizes a neglect of our collective well-being, she continued. Every story I gathered has underscored a truth. Healthcare is not a privilege based on wealth but a right owed to every member of our community. Alan shifted in his seat, his smirk wavering as Emma's words took root. Each sentence felt like a sturdy thread weaving a fabric of unity, one that could not be unraveled so easily. She caught his eye, and this time, she didn't flinch. Instead, she felt emboldened by the knowledge she had gathered, empowered by the stories that would no longer remain silent. Let us face it, the funding decisions being made aren't just numbers on a spreadsheet. They represent families left vulnerable, Emma pressed on. I'm asking for accountability, transparency, and a commitment to a healthcare system that prioritizes lives over profit margins. The murmur of agreement swelled within the crowd, and Emma could sense the collective power at her back. Richard had stood shoulder to shoulder with her through this process, his unwavering support amplifying her courage. She knew he was proud of her, he believed in her potential, and now she was ready to prove it to herself, ready to channel her fear into a force for change. Imagine a future where each of us can access the care we need, without the looming shadow of financial trepidation hanging overhead. A world where every member of this community can feel secure in their health, Emma exclaimed, her words rising above the previous doubts she had battled. For the first time, she felt the weight of responsibility shift from her heart to her actions. She was not just bringing a complaint to the council, she was painting a vision of what was possible, a shared dream inviting all to join the fight. However, change doesn't come passively, she declared with newfound conviction. Change is ignited by courage, and I stand here today, ready to be that catalyst. The City Council needs to hear our stories, and they need to lead by example. Emma reached into her folder and presented a meticulously drafted petition, one that represented countless signatures collected from community members united in their plea for change. This isn't just paper, it's the voices of dignity and resilience. It's the embodiment of our determination to fight for what is right. Will you listen to us? As she projected the final words, the chamber erupted applause, cheers, and an overwhelming sense of solidarity flooded through the air. Emma, taken aback and yet invigorated, reveled in the moment that felt remarkably surreal. Alan's expression darkened, the authority he wielded seeming to slip through his grasp. He attempted to regroup, but Emma interjected before he could dismiss their momentum. You cannot brush us aside. We are a force that has collectively risen to demand what is rightfully ours, she asserted, her voice rising above Alan's interjections. With the heat of their confrontation swirling around them, a wave of support from the gathered crowd surged, demanding answers and acknowledging Emma's bravery. In that moment, a palpable shift occurred. Enough was enough, and she had proven her point beyond personal ambition. She had become a leader, not merely through titles but through actions that sparked recognition. When Emma stepped down from the podium, her heart was no longer racing from fear but soaring with pride and satisfaction. She had achieved what she once deemed impossible. More than stepping into her voice, she had established herself as a beacon of hope for her community. With concrete proposals and growing support behind her, Emma was ready to galvanize further action. She could feel an undeniable strength rising within her, one that would sustain her fight against the bureaucratic indifference that had once intimidated her. She had conquered her fears, proving not only her competence as a leader but her commitment to a cause much larger than her own aspirations. As she exited the chamber, Richard's approving glance solidified her resolve. She had transformed from a mere participant in her community's struggles to an empowered individual capable of shaping its future. She had achieved clarity, stability, and a pathway forward. Her once muted voice now amplified into a force for change. Emma understood deep within that this was just the beginning, a crucial stepping stone towards the fulfilling journey that lay ahead. Now, as she stepped back into the world outside, she was a woman transformed, a resolute advocate for change, ready to embrace every challenge that awaited her. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories that illustrate personal triumph. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm that brings us these inspirational journeys. Comment your reactions and theories about Emma's transformation and what it means for her future. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this powerful conclusion and understand the importance of standing up for their dreams and communities. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second.